Steve sat by the campfire of his quaint house, relished in the mesmerizing view of the snow-covered landscape outside. The world around him was a serene, icy paradise, and all seemed right within the universe. The flickering flames of that campfire danced in the chill of the evening, casting long, wavering shadows on the wooden walls. And as he lost himself in the gentle crackling of that campfire, a mysterious shadow fell across the frosty ground before him. He looked up, puzzled, only to see a horse approaching him, ridden by a weary villager. The villager dismounted and entered Steve's house, the warmth of that fire embracing them both. Breathless and frantic, that villager quickly explained their dire situation.
A remote village, nestled just a few thousand blocks away, was in the throes of a calamity like no other. The most monstrous snowstorm that the world had ever witnessed had descended upon their small village. And so, the villagers were trapped within the icy grasp of their homes, imprisoned by the towering drifts of snow. Their food supplies had dwindled, and despair clung to them like the frost on their windows.
Desperation was etched across that villager's face as he begged for the Steve to help, his voice trembling with fear and anxiety. The other villagers lacked the strength, courage, subscribability, and various other abilities that were needed to face the wrath of nature. And so, only the Steve, with his unique skills and unwavering determination, could venture forth to rescue them. And so, without hesitation, Steve agreed. And so, he rose from his spot by that campfire and mounted his trusty steed, the chilling wind cutting through the night's air as he set out on his journey, leaving his cozy heaven behind him. The fate of this snowbound village now rested squarely upon his shoulders, and he was determined to answer their call for help, no matter the perils that awaited him on this treacherous path through the frozen wilderness. And so, Steve rode his horse through the wintry wilderness, guided by a map that pointed to the village in dire need. The landscape was shrouded in a thick, swirling snowstorm, making it difficult to discern anything. Now, he knew that he was in the right place, according to that map, but he just couldn't see any trace of that village. And so, frustration and concern gnawed at him. It should be here, but it wasn't. Well, that's what he thought, until he spotted a solitary chimney barely poking through the snow-covered ground. Eagerly, he dismounted his horse and began to dig in the snow. With every shovel of icy powder that he cleared, the realization dawned upon him. He was standing on top of that village that he was supposed to save. And as Steve finally uncovered the entrance to that house, he stepped inside and was met with a chilling sight. Every villager who had called this place home lay lifeless on the snow-covered interiors. The gravity of the situation weighed heavily on him. Heartbroken, Steve moved from one house to another, only to discover the same morbid scene replayed in each dwelling. The village that had once teemed with life and prosperity was now nothing more than a ghostly graveyard, its inhabitants frozen in the grip of a relentless winter. Steve was about to leave that place, as the overwhelming grief was almost too much for him to bear. But then, a glimmer of hope caught his eye. A weathered diary, partially hidden beneath a frost-covered table. In the dim light of the dying embers, Steve opened that diary and read the final poignant entry written from the perspective of a villager mere moments before the storm had engulfed them.
Several villagers on the northern side of our village have reported seeing a strange yellow creature carrying a red glowing object in the sky as it flew towards the forest. Fear and curiosity gripped our hearts, but then, just a few minutes later, a deafening crash resonated from the direction in which that strange yellow creature had vanished towards. And then, as if in response to this mysterious event, the world turned on us. The most ferocious snowstorm that we had ever seen descended upon our humble village. We were trapped, hopeless in our homes, surrounded by the unrelenting fury of the elements. Our food supply dwindled, and hope flickered, ever dimming. Despite our best efforts, we are succumbing to the bitter cold and hunger. As I write these final words, I pray that we will be saved. But I am well aware that at this point, that is very unlikely.
Steve was left in a state of bewilderment by that diary's chilling revelation. He couldn't shake the feeling that strange yellow creature and the red glowing object held the key to the village's tragic demise. And so, as he stood there in the lifeless villager's house, the haunting details of their fate echoed in his mind, when the outside world suddenly shook with a loud crash. Steve's heart raced as he rushed outside to investigate, only to find a sight that defied all reason. The once violent storm had ceased somehow in just a few minutes, leaving behind an eerie calm. But in the distance, against the backdrop of the frigid, pale landscape, a strange, otherworldly being hovered in the air, bathed in an otherworldly yellow light, and it clutched a small fragment of a red object in its frail hands. It struck Steve like a bolt of realization. That entity was connected to this storm and had taken a piece of that red object away from the forest. The answers he sought for the closure of the village's tragic end likely lay within that forest. Determination hardened Steve's resolve. He knew that he was going to have to venture into the heart of the dark and mysterious forest in order to unravel the secrets hidden there. All so that he could uncover why those strange events occurred and hopefully stop them from happening to any other villager in the future. But by then, that cryptic creature had flown off, And so, Steve's quest had evolved from a mission of rescue to a mission of discovery and justice. And so, he set forth into that forest, leaving the ghostly village behind him in the pursuit of the unknown. As Steve pushed deeper into that forest, an unsettling aura of dark, demonic power grew stronger with each step. Whispers of malevolence seemed to dance through the trees, and the eerie silence was only broken by the howling winds and by the rustling of leaves. It was as though the very woods themselves held their breath in anticipation. The enigmatic force beckoned him further into its heart, and Steve was unable to resist the pull. Time slipped away as he followed the ominous presence. His every breath tingled with the bitter taste of dread. Hours turned into an agonizing journey, the forest secrets unraveling before him. However, nightfall arrived with a sudden and bitter fury, ushering in a snowstorm that clawed at his skin. The flakes were relentless, and Steve quickly realized that he was unprepared for the tempest that raged around him. Desperation and a biting chill set in, driving him to seek shelter within the ancient embrace of a cave. Inside, he scrambled to build a fire, the flames crackling in the dimly lit space, offering a semblance of refuge from the unforgiving elements. The warmth was a temporary break against the biting cold outside, and Steve took a moment to catch his breath, believing he had weathered the worst of that storm. Yet, in his haste, he hadn't considered the consequences of a fire in such a confined space. As time passed, the cave filled with thick smoke that blew in all directions, but was trapped within the unforgiving rock walls. The air grew dense and oppressive, searing his lungs with each breath. Panic clawed at him, and he fought to crawl to safety. But the insidious smoke clouded his vision and invaded his senses. As the world closed in, Steve's strength waned, and a shadow of darkness descended. With a final, gasping breath, he succumbed to the suffocating smoke, his body falling into the unconscious, leaving him at the mercy of the forest's sinister secrets and the relentless storm that raged outside. When Steve finally awoke, the campfire that had kept him warm had dwindled to smouldering embers, and the raging snowstorm had dissipated, leaving behind an air of tranquility in that dark forest. But what was even more startling, however, was the presence of a group of snow foxes that surrounded him. Their bright, crystal eyes bore into him with an almost haunting curiosity. For a moment, he was unsure whether these creatures were harmless or posed a threat. With his survival instincts on high alert, Steve made a difficult decision, and he quickly moved to draw his weapon and began to strike at the snow foxes. Now, his first swing was swift and lethal, taking down one of those majestic creatures. But the remaining foxes were startled by the sudden violence as they darted away into the frosty underbrush, their tails disappearing like whispers in the snow. With the immediate danger seemingly averted, Steve felt a fleeting sense of safety. But still, he knew that he had to keep moving, as it would do him no good to stay where he currently was. And so, driven by his mission to find the elusive red glowing object, he carried on moving. The forest, shrouded in secrets and enigma, loomed ahead. But as Steve ventured deeper into the heart of that forest, he was suddenly met by the anguished cries of a dying animal. Instinctively, he raced towards the sound, his heart pounding with empathy for the suffering creature. However, his compassion would soon be overshadowed by sheer terror, because as he reached the source of those cries, he was confronted by a terrifying vision. A demon in yellow robes leaped from the shadows, his malevolent presence causing Steve to recoil in fear. But this was just an illusion, as that yellow-robed monster disappeared once he blinked. Now, Steve knew that he couldn't allow himself to be paralyzed by this, and so, with sheer determination, he brushed aside the horrifying apparition and pressed on. But as he went deeper into that forest, the atmosphere grew more surreal. Steve's path was fraught with unnatural occurrences, and he couldn't shake the feeling that he was in a realm where the laws of reality were warped. Suddenly, he spotted the ghostly form of a fox by a river, its translucent body shimmering with an otherworldly light. Without thinking, Steve rushed towards this creature, hoping to understand its significance. However, to his astonishment, the ghostly fox turned on him, attacking him with an otherworldly ferocity. Steve was knocked to the ground, and for a brief moment, the world around him blurred and shifted. When he opened his eyes, the ghostly fox had vanished, leaving him shaken and disoriented. This was all very strange. The forest had become an unpredictable and enigmatic place, and Steve's determination was tested as he picked himself up from the ground and prepared himself for whatever mysteries lay ahead. With each step, the boundary between reality and the supernatural grew increasingly blurred, and he couldn't help but wonder what he was destined to discover in the heart of this eerie forest. But as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows in that eerie forest, Steve continued his difficult journey through the gathering darkness. Night was falling, and the chilling embrace of the forest was becoming all the more menacing. But thankfully, his resourcefulness had allowed him to stockpile some supplies during his travels. And so Steve managed to construct a makeshift camp, complete with a small tent and a cozy white bed. It was a humble respite amidst the eerie surroundings, a sanctuary within the realm of the unknown. But just when he thought he might have found a moment of peace, an unexpected and unsettling event occurred. A deafening clap of thunder reverberated through the forest, causing Steve to jump in alarm. He looked out into the distance, searching for the source of that thunder. But there was no sign of a storm, no warning, nothing that should have triggered such a tremendous noise. But there it was, once again, standing ominously just behind the spot where the bolt of lightning should have struck was the ghostly snowy fox. Its presence sent shivers down Steve's spine. The fox seemed to be a harbinger of strange and unnatural phenomena in this forest, and it stared at him with its haunting and unblinking eyes. A second bolt of lightning struck the exact same spot, illuminating the surroundings with a blinding flash. As quickly as it had appeared, the fox vanished into thin air, leaving Steve bewildered and confused. The forest fell silent, the only trace of the mysterious event being the lingering image of the fox in Steve's mind. Doubts crept in, and he wondered if his senses were playing tricks on him. But with a weary sigh, he reluctantly climbed into his small white bed, trying to put the strange encounter out of his thoughts. Sleep would be his only respite, as the mysteries of that forest continue to loom in the shadows, waiting for his discovery. In the early hours of the morning, Steve was suddenly awoken from his restless slumber by the disturbing sound of his possessions being shuffled and moved around. His eyes snapped open as he realized the ghostly, snowy fox was the culprit, stealing his belongings right from his campsite. In an instant, adrenaline surged through him, and he leaped into action, charging after the evil fox. His footsteps crunched through the snow as he closed the gap, almost within reach of the elusive creature. He leapt at it, but then, before he could grab it, the fox just vanished into thin air, leaving Steve standing there, bewildered and breathless. And so, having no idea where that fox had vanished to, he was forced to just return to his campsite. But the sight that greeted him was one of devastation. His once orderly camp now lay in ruins. How could this have happened? He was only gone for a few minutes. The eerie feeling that had been haunting him since he entered the forest intensified. These were not mere visions. No. Something sinister and inexplicable was transpiring in this unnatural place, and Steve's sense of unease deepened. As he scanned the wreckage, his eyes were drawn to a sudden, brilliant red flash that pierced the gloom of that forest. It was so vivid and startling that Steve knew that it was close. And so, with nothing left to lose, and driven by an unyielding determination, Steve decided to follow this immense glow. Perhaps this was the elusive red object that the villagers had seen, and he was willing to unravel the secrets of this cursed forest to find it. And so, Steve relentlessly followed the brilliant red glow for what felt like an eternity, as he carefully navigated over the frozen rivers, strode through the snow, and climbed over the spruce trees. His journey led him deeper into the forest's heart, where he eventually stumbled upon a desolate ruin with a colossal red crystal shattered in the center. That must be what the villagers saw, and the broken fragments must be what that demonic entity took away from that village. That crystal exuded an eerie and ungodly aura, an unnatural energy that was undeniably not of this world, drawn by both curiosity and an inexplicable sense of purpose. He approached the enigmatic crystal, his senses tingling as he ventured closer. But the closer he came, the stronger the aura grew, and he could practically feel the unsettling power radiating from it. But just as he was about to touch that crystal and unlock the secrets that it held, the ghostly, snowy fox emerged from the very core of that crystal. His heart raced as he instinctively took a step back. The fox's presence was nerve-wracking, and its eyes bore into his soul. Suddenly, the fox unleashed a bone-chilling screech, its cry echoing through the forest, before a blinding burst of light engulfed it. The very air seemed to vibrate with an otherworldly energy. Then, in a shocking explosion, the fox vanished. In the place where the fox had stood, there now flowed a meandering river, as if conjured from the thin air itself. Steve stood there, utterly perplexed by the surreal events unfolding around him. But that massive red crystal beckoned him, its allure stronger than ever before. With a deep breath, he readied himself, and he took a hesitant step forward. Determined, Steve reached out and touched that crystal. But as Steve touched the mysterious red crystal, the world around him shifted, and he was thrust into a vision of endless suffering and pain. He felt it all, every moment of agony, every scream, every tear shed throughout the vast expanse of the universe. But this was not just any random suffering. No, this was the future, a relentless cascade of torment that every single entity in existence would ever endure. The intensity of it was overwhelming, and this revelation struck him with a profound realization. He was somehow linked to all this suffering, connected to its source. He had become an unwitting architect of pain and suffering, and he felt the weight of responsibility for a fate he could have never imagined. He recoiled from the torment, desperately wanting to forget everything that he had witnessed, as the agony was insurmountable. And so, in an act of desperation, Steve believed that the only way to sever this cruel connection was to destroy that crystal. He clenched his fists and began to punch it with all his might, each strike fueled by his determination to put an end to the visions of suffering. However, he missed out on a crucial detail. The crystal was perched on a precarious plank of wood, and the Steve's relentless blows had a catastrophic consequence. With an abrupt hit, the crystal was sent tumbling down the plank and into the river. Panicked, Steve tried to chase after it, frantically splashing through that water. But the crystal raced ahead of him, carried by the relentless current. The river flowed faster and faster, and he was unable to reach it. This was bad, very bad, as he was going to have to endure the weight of all this suffering for the rest of his life, as he would never be able to get that crystal. However, as Steve watched the massive crystal being swept away by the unforgiving currents of that river, he couldn't help but feel a mixture of fear and relief. The crystal's fate was uncertain, but it was more than likely going to meet its end in the raging waters or be destroyed by the relentless oceans. Or so this Steve believed. And that realization gave him a glimmer of hope, a slight solace amid the turmoil, as maybe everything was going to be okay, and perhaps all those visions were just lies sent to him to corrupt his soul. And so, with a heavy heart, Steve decided it was time to give up on this quest and to return to his house. Now, the journey back was a turbulent and terrifying time as he grappled with the incomprehensible visions he had witnessed. Evil thoughts rushed through his mind. Destruction was needed. But he resisted those thoughts as the weight of what he had experienced clung to him, and he found it difficult to make sense of the vast suffering he had glimpsed into. And so, upon his return, Steve's determination to leave it all behind drove him to action, as he meticulously gathered all the necessary ingredients, his hands trembling as he mixed them. He was brewing a potion that would hopefully allow him to forget everything that he had seen, to erase the anguish and the haunting memories that had tormented him. And so, with the potion in hand, he hesitated for a brief moment before reflecting on the enormity of the situation. The consequences were unknown, but he could no longer bear the burden of truth that he had uncovered. And so, taking a deep breath, he raised the vial to his lips and drank that potion. It coursed through him a soothing veil that swept away all those bad memories and the harrowing visions, leaving only a sense of internal peace in its wake. As the last traces of recollection dissolved, Steve's mind was finally free from the torment of its experiences, but at the cost of losing the profound knowledge and the questions that had haunted him. The forest and that crystal were behind him now, and he could only hope that he had made the right choice, though he would never truly know. And so, to learn what happened next, you'll need to watch this video.